A quiet town's dark secret, the Clutter family mystery that changed America. The quiet night air over Holcomb, Kansas, felt peaceful, too peaceful for what was about to happen. Inside a large farmhouse on the edge of town, the Clutter family slept, unaware that two men were already on their way. The house stood alone under the open sky, lights out, a symbol of safety and hard work. But in a few short hours, it would become the scene of one of America's most shocking crimes. It was just before dawn when the stillness broke. Two strangers crept toward the Clutter home. They weren't from Holcomb. No one in town even knew their names. But they knew everything about the Clutters. They had come for one thing. Money they believed was hidden inside. When they entered, the house was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock. The men moved quietly, flashlights in hand, whispering to each other. Upstairs, Herbert Clutter, a respected farmer and father of four, woke up to the sound of footsteps. He didn't yet know that his kindness and a story shared with the wrong person had brought danger to his door. Moments later, the calm Kansas night exploded into chaos. Voices rose, furniture scraped, and fear filled every corner of the home. The two strangers were demanding something that didn't exist, a safe full of cash that was never real. Mr. Clutter tried to reason with them, his voice steady but scared. He had no safe, no secret stash, but the men didn't believe him. Down the hall, his wife Bonnie and teenage children, Nancy and Kenyon, could hear everything. The family, known for their faith, honesty, and love, were now prisoners in their own home. The two strangers tied them up, one by one. The smell of dust, rope, and fear mixed in the cold night air. Outside, the wind carried no sound of what was happening inside that farmhouse. No neighbors saw the shadows moving behind the curtains. No one heard the muffled cries. Then came silence again, heavy and thick. What happened next would leave the small town of Holcomb changed forever. By the next morning, the Clutter home would be surrounded by flashing lights, police cars, and shocked neighbors asking the same question: why them? That morning, a friend of Nancy's, worried because she hadn't shown up for church, walked up the gravel path to the Clutter house. She knocked once, no answer. She tried again, still nothing. She stepped inside. The quiet was unbearable, and what she found in that house would haunt her and all of America for decades. The morning sun was bright, but the house felt dark. Nancy's friend, Susan Kidwell, stepped into the Clutter home calling softly, "Nancy, are you awake?" There was no answer, just the creak of the wooden floor and the hum of the wind outside. Susan wasn't alone. Another friend, along with the family's housekeeper, Mrs. Ellen Rupp, had come with her. They had worried when Nancy didn't show up for church. The Clutters were always on time, always dependable. Something felt wrong. They moved slowly through the house, their voices low and shaky. Everything looked neat, just like always. Dishes put away, books stacked on the table. But the air felt heavy, as if the whole place was holding its breath. Then, as they climbed the stairs, they saw something that made their hearts stop. Nancy's room door was slightly open. Susan pushed it gently. The scene before her was one she would never forget. Nancy lay on her bed, still, silent, and bound. The reality hit them all at once. Susan screamed. The other woman rushed out of the room. Panic filled the air as they ran to the phone, calling the sheriff. Within minutes, police cars began to roll down the long dirt road toward the Clutter farm. Sheriff Earl Robinson and his team entered the house carefully, their boots echoing against the hardwood floors. What they found inside would shake even the toughest among them. Room by room, they uncovered the terrible truth. In the basement, Herbert Clutter was found, tied and lifeless. Nearby was his son, Kenyon. Upstairs, Bonnie Clutter lay in her bed, still as the others. The crime was brutal, but also strange. Nothing seemed stolen. No sign of a robbery gone right or wrong. The sheriff stood in silence, staring at the walls of the once happy home. Who could do this? Why the Clutters? As news spread, the quiet town of Holcomb turned into a storm of confusion. Reporters poured in from every direction. Locals gathered outside the yellow police tape, whispering and crying. The Clutters weren't just another family. They were the heart of the town. Herbert Clutter was respected by everyone. His children were bright and kind. There was no reason, no warning. The police began searching for clues. They found 2 sets of footprints, pieces of rope, and empty shotgun shells. But no one recognized the pattern of the shoes, and the killers had left almost nothing behind. Days turned into weeks. Fear spread through Kansas. People began locking their doors at night for the first time. Families who had once left keys under the mat now slept with lights on. The newspapers called it the crime that changed Kansas. But for investigators, it was a mystery with too many questions and no answers. Then, miles away in another part of Kansas, a small break came. A man in prison overheard something, a story about 2 ex-convicts who had once talked about robbing a farmer named Clutter. The sheriff's office received the tip and sent agents from the Kansas Bureau of Investigation to check it out. Among them was a determined agent named Alvin Dewey. He had known the Clutter family personally. This case was not just another file to him. When Dewey heard the names of the suspects, something in his gut told him it was real. He ordered a full search. The pet names were Perry Smith and Richard Hickok. And at that moment, a new kind of chase began, one that would cross states, test the patience of law enforcement, and hold the attention of the entire nation. But catching them wouldn't be easy, because by then, Perry and Hickok were already gone, far from Kansas, headed toward Mexico. By the time the Kansas Bureau of Investigation traced the 2 men, Perry Smith and Richard Hickok were already hundreds of miles away. They drove through the flat plains of Texas, down into Mexico, laughing as they spent the few dollars they had. The plan that started as a quick robbery had turned into something far darker, something even they couldn't undo. But the world was catching up. Agent Alvin Dewey and his team refused to stop. He barely slept, studying every lead, every rumor, every trace of where the men might go. Across America, newspapers printed their faces. 2 ordinary-looking men who had done something unthinkable. Weeks passed. The men drifted from city to city, trying to disappear. They sold stolen goods, changed hotels, and told lies to anyone who asked questions. But no matter how far they ran, their guilt followed. Perry wrote in a notebook about nightmares that woke him up at night. Hickok joked to strangers, pretending nothing was wrong. But deep down, both knew their time was running out. In December 1959, a stroke of luck changed everything. A man who had once been in prison with Hickok told police he had received postcards from him from Mexico. That tip led investigators straight to their trail. Within weeks, Dewey's team tracked them to Las Vegas. On December 30th, 1959, just after Christmas, the 2 men were caught driving a stolen car. When police searched it, they found the evidence that tied them directly to the Clutter home: a pair of boots matching the prints found at the scene, and a radio that belonged to the Clutters. The chase was over. The killers had been caught. When the news reached Holcomb, the town breathed again. But the relief was mixed with sadness. The Clutter home still stood quiet, but it no longer felt like the same place. Families continued to lock their doors at night, unable to forget what had happened in their once safe town. During questioning, both men tried to blame each other, but soon the truth came out. Perry admitted to what they had done, all because they believed Herbert Clutter kept thousands of dollars locked away in a safe. But there was no safe, no fortune. The entire plan had been built on a lie told by a former prison inmate. The trial that followed was one of the most watched in Kansas history. People lined up outside the courthouse. Reporters filled every seat. The whole country wanted to understand how 2 men could walk into a family's home and destroy 4 innocent lives for nothing. In 1960, both Perry Smith and Richard Hickok were found guilty and sentenced to death. They spent nearly 5 years waiting on death row in the Kansas State Penitentiary. Finally, on April 14, 1965, they were executed by hanging, the same day, side by side. For the people of Holcomb, it wasn't celebration, it was closure. But it didn't erase the fear or sadness left behind. The farmhouse was eventually torn down, but the story never disappeared. Years later, Truman Capote's In Cold Blood turned the tragedy into one of the most famous true crime books in American history, a story that made the world look differently at crime, punishment, and small-town innocence. Even today, people still drive past the empty land where the Clutter house once stood, wondering how such evil could have found its way into such a peaceful place. And maybe that's what makes this story so haunting, not just the crime, but the reminder that darkness can hide even in the quietest towns. This was a quiet town's dark secret. The Clutter family mystery that changed America. A true story that shook an entire nation and forever changed how we see safety, trust, and the meaning of justice. If you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, share this video, subscribe for more real American crime stories, and let's keep the truth alive.